Welcome to the Cracking the Growth Code podcast. I'm your host, Matt Zembruski, and I'm pleased to have as my guest today, Bill Inmon. He's written 67 books, which have been translated into 9 languages and sold over 1 million copies. He was named one of the 10 most influential thought leaders in the world by Computer World magazine. And in the world of data and IT, which I come a little bit from, but not a lot from, he is known as the godfather of data warehousing. So he's a celebrity in many circles, and I'm honored to have him as our guest here. He also, from a personal perspective, has 2 Scotty dogs and a wife in Denver, Colorado. Welcome to the show, Bill.
Thank you, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here.
Really glad that you're making the time for this because, again, I know you've done podcasts before. A lot of times they're focusing on the data elements and on the technology and moving the bits and bytes and all that around, just to keep it very simple for our listeners and so forth. This particular conversation, I want to go a different track. We have a lot of current and future leaders who follow us, and the questions that they're often concerned about or asking about are about sustainable growth. How do they move a team to high performance? How do they move their career faster because they're hungry for taking things to the next level? So I want to start just by number one, acknowledging your expertise in the industry at growing not only technologies, but also I know along the way you've grown a lot of leaders and teams in order to grow the enterprises and including founding companies, being CEO of companies and so forth. So from a leadership perspective, you know, as a savvy leader, how would you describe from a CEO's perspective, what do you look for and what do you think about when it comes to the topic of sustainable growth in an organization?
Well, Matt, my whole career has been a career of vision. That I always started with a vision. Now, let me tell you, from a standpoint of being a visionary person and having visionary companies, that's the most difficult path that you can take. But it's also, as far as I'm concerned, the most rewarding path you can take. But every company has a vision of one sort or the other. Most companies use the vision of other people. They go borrow the vision and improve on it. That's what most companies are doing or have done. The problem with that approach is there's an end to the vision that you end up saying, well, we've fulfilled the vision. Now what do we do? The problem with somebody that has a new vision is that it is very difficult to change people's minds and their mindset with the new vision, even when the new vision is the right thing to do and the right way to go. So I look at companies from a standpoint of vision. Once upon a time, IBM Corporation was a very visionary company. They started the early notions of database. They started the early notions of transaction processing. They saw that transaction processing could do great things in the world, and it did. And believe me, transaction processing changed the world and the relationship of the world to the computer. But then one day, IBM woke up and ran out of vision, and they haven't had a visionary product since the day of transaction databases. And instead, other companies like Microsoft and Oracle and SAP and other companies have taken the vision that IBM started with and have taken them and made them grow and prosper as well. So when I look at companies, I look at the world of vision. What is the vision of this company? How far can it take them? What do they do when the vision runs out and is fulfilled. That's a little bit about the way I think about these things.
That makes a lot of sense to start at the vision, because it's like I've talked with different people about how people think about it. And I think about it from that same perspective, like big to small versus small to big. If you start with the big picture, then you know where you're going to go. But like you're saying, if you run out of vision, if you've done this for a number of years or whatever, and the company's delivered on that, how do you create something? So it sounds like the companies that you've created and technologies you've created have been more from a creative, like blank sheet of paper. Like if we were to do this, let's build it. Is that true?
That's absolutely the truth. My first company was one called Prism Solutions, started in California. And I have to tell you, when I started Prism Solutions, I had no idea what it was like to, number one, have a visionary company, and number two, to be the guiding light for the company. That was a new experience for me, and very exciting, very challenging. It certainly got me out of my comfort patterns, but that's absolutely true. And then came the first issue was having the vision. The second issue was building the technology, and then the third vision was selling the vision to the world. And because as a visionary and a person that does have vision, people, I'm going to tell you right now, for whatever reason, people are reluctant to adopt a new vision. And the hardest part of that was the getting people to change their mind. But my first vision in life was one of something called data warehouse. And in the early days of data warehouse met with fierce resistance. People hated data warehouse, and but we kept being persistent. We kept talking. The thing that allowed us to go from a vision to reality was the fact that data warehouse directly addressed business value, that you could show this is what we're doing and this is where the business value is. And once that message of business value got through, then things changed completely. Then all of a sudden, the very people that had been adamantly against what we were doing were suddenly people that were trying to copy and to take our ideas and build their own company. And so it starts with vision. And, you know, as another example of a company that once had a vision, that's kind of interesting. Once upon a time in Boston, there was a company called Wang Computers. And Wang Computers had one of the first notions of word processing. Now, once upon a time, everybody sat down with a typewriter. By the way, I challenge you to even find a typewriter nowadays. But once upon a time, business was run with typewriters. And then Wang had the vision of, gee, maybe we could use the computer to improve things. And Wang came out with one of the early versions of a word processor. And quite frankly, the early versions of the Wang word processor were quite good. I had a version and I used it all the time. It was good. But then one day, the world adopted word processing, and Wang ran out of vision. Their vision had been fulfilled. The world did have this an innovation they made, and I don't think Wang even exists anymore today. And that's another example of a company reaching the end of its vision.
Yeah, I raised my hand when you first said that because I'm familiar with the Wang building. I was actually near there. I'm in the Boston area. I know you're out in the Denver area.
Mm-hmm.
The Wang building is still there in the Boston area, but it's no longer Wang. It's now just the company that used to be there, and it's something else. It's been repurposed. But it's very interesting because you hinted at something at the end of your description about the vision running out. You hinted about a lack of innovation, I believe. So can you talk about how innovation really was? It seems like it's one of the cornerstones of how your companies began and how sustainable growing companies continue. They keep the innovation in the equation.
Well, the way I look at things, which may not be the way the world looks at it, but the way I look at it, there's really two kinds of innovation. There's innovation of the vision, and there's innovation of the implementation. And these are very different things. Both of them are innovations, but they're very different from each other. Innovation to a vision means that you take the vision and you improve on the vision. It's still visionary. Innovation to the implementation means that you create a widget or a something that fulfills the vision. So when you talk about innovation, I think at least I try to make the distinction between those kinds of innovation, because some innovations are visionary, some innovations are implementation, and the implementation visions, the implementation innovations quickly, reasonably over time, run out of gas. That you can only innovate technology so far until you've done everything that could be done. As a good example of that is Microsoft Word. We've been using, my wife and I, Microsoft Word, golly Moses, for a long time now. And every now and then they come out with a new version of Microsoft Word. But the new versions of Microsoft Word don't do anything. They don't do anything different. They just put the buttons to do something in a different place and frustrate my wife and myself. And Microsoft uses this as a marketing and sales technique. But in terms of improving the way that we do word processing on a Microsoft computer, it doesn't. They're not improving. They're not giving us anything new with word processing that we haven't had before, and that's what happens when your implementation people start to innovate. And when they start to innovate for the purpose of making sales and marketing, your company's in trouble.
Mm-hmm. So do you feel that was in the Microsoft example, is that the running out of the company vision, or is that the running out of the implementation vision, or from an innovation? Like, what would help Microsoft? Is it innovating on their vision and where they want to take word processing, or is it innovating on the technology of actually implementing it?
Microsoft, once upon a time, had a vision of improving word processing. They haven't changed or improved that vision, as far as I can tell, in a quarter of a century. And all they do is change the widgets. What's the old expression? Rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic.
Right.
That's all that Microsoft is doing.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a great perspective. Having myself grown up in the '80s, I've been through the early days of all that, and share a very similar opinion. I want to since you're talking about innovation and related to products and delivery and so forth, I want to shift a little bit and use the term that's familiar in my circles, agile, and talk about agile. I'm curious from your perspective, building companies and building teams with products and et cetera, and getting that out there. What percentage of the companies that you worked in or built in the last like 10 to 20 years were working with agile delivery teams? Was agile something that was part of the framework, or not really from your perspective?
In recent vintage, a lot of them use agile in recent vintage. And I have to say, there's no question about the fact that the development process and the work done by technicians needed improvement. There's absolutely no question about that. And I think that Agile has greatly enhanced the way we approach and think about building projects.
That's good. Yeah, I was just curious about it because it was so talked about for so long, the term agile and all that stuff, and now it's so accepted that it's just in the fabric of companies now. So let's talk about people. So let's go back to when you were founding a company, the initial hires that you had to make. I'd imagine walk us through sort of what went through your head as you were bringing on the initial people for one of your companies, and what you were looking for.
I'm going to answer your question, but at the end of this, I don't want you to think that I'm a terrible person, because what I'm about to say, I'm not a terrible person, but I'm also a realist. The things that we look for when we go to look for people to join our team are, number one, people that are independent thinkers. Number two, that share the vision that we have, and have the enthusiasm and are self-motivators. Those are the things that we look for. Having stated that, it's been my experience when you start a new adventure and company, that you're going inevitably, I don't care who you are, make some mistakes in hiring. And I can tell you this right now. This is where you me think of me as a terrible person. The sooner you depart from a person that is not a good fit for what they do, the better off you are. One of the worst things you can do is try to remold a person. A person either fits or they don't fit. And if they don't fit, they're likely to never fit. And trying to keep them in their job and get them to perform and do what they need to do and ought to do is a mistake. It's much better to simply part ways in a friendly fashion, in as civilized fashion as you can, but nevertheless keeping dead wood in a new venture. Now, I'm sure this is true for larger companies as well. And I'm sure this is true for larger companies. I've worked my last 30 or 40 years in smaller companies, but in a startup environment, keeping dead wood in a startup environment is simply poisonous. And I have to say that a lot of the people that I've had to depart with have been good people. I like them as individuals. They were friends of mine, but they weren't doing the enterprise any good. So the people that we have in my current company, I like to use the expression the Marines use: a few good men and women. And we're not looking for an army of people. We're looking for the right people. And so anyway, I guess that makes me a hard boss to work for. But I guess that makes me a hard boss to work for. But that's the way it is.
No, it's a fantastic answer, Bill. I don't think that's a hard boss at all. It's just someone who is committed to the vision of the company and wants to make sure there's a right fit, like you're saying, a right cultural fit. And yeah, go ahead.
I in my very first company, Prism Solutions, I saw what happened when you tried to take somebody that wasn't a good fit and remold them. That doesn't work. And so ever since then, when I've had a venture startup, and it now you have to give the person a chance to prove themselves. You have to find out whether they really do or do not fit. So you have to do that. But once you've given them the chance of them not fitting and they don't fit, then as soon, and I tell you, it's good for them as well, because they're not in the long run going to be happy or successful in your company if they're not a good fit.
So let's lean into that a little bit. I agree with exactly what you said, and I've worked with other startup co-founders, and they've had similar perspectives. So you're not the only tough boss out there. I think I respect the integrity and the passion that you have for delivering that. I'm curious from if you go back and look at that in hindsight, was there anything you could have done differently? Like, is there a way to figure out if someone's not the best fit before they come into the culture? I know that's a $64,000 question, but what are your thoughts on that?
Matt, if I had an answer for you, I'd give it to you. The best I can tell you is it's a crapshoot. You do your best to interview the person. One technique that we've used that's worked out well for us is instead of bringing people on, we use them as a consultant for a six-month period and then decide whether we want to bring them on or not. You can't do that in every case, but in the cases that you can do that, that's a good technique. But at the end of the day, it's a crapshoot. Some people work out and some people don't.
Yeah, yeah, I wanted to ask the question. I know there's never an easy answer to it, but yeah, and that's where the probationary period, I think, came up. Both my parents were human resources their whole careers, so I was sort of brought up with this language, but I think there used to be a probationary period of like 90 days, and that was sort of the acceptable thing. You come in as a contractor for 90 days, and then if that works out, you become the employee, or maybe you're an employee right up front, but it's a probationary period. So consulting for 6 months, that's a great way to go if you can.
If you can, and sometimes you can do that, sometimes you can't.
That makes sense. So I know we're coming up on time. I want to wind it down, but I want to ask a question. I know there's a lot of in your head and from your experience. If you were to boil down for other leaders out there today, they could be a junior leader who's just getting in the game, or they could be like yourself, someone who's an experienced company founder, senior executive. What are your top 3 tips to best lead your company, through growth and through new people, and all the different economies that we have to phase through here as we go? What are your top 3 tips for leaders?
Well, my top tip for a leader is don't be afraid of making mistakes. The only people that don't make mistakes are the people that never do anything. Now don't be proud of your mistakes. Learn from your mistakes. But if you get paralyzed about making mistakes, you're not ever going to go anywhere. A second thing that and this is kind of a personal thing, is in terms of leadership. I try to do a lot publicly: articles, books, speeches, seminars, webinars. That consumes about 80% of my time in my life. And the thing about those activities it's a lot of work to write an article, a lot of work to write a book, a lot of work to do a good presentation. But you tend to attract other people that have the same mindset. And so being able to get to know those people and hear their ideas is wonderful. So going out in the public and exposing yourself, and people, for whatever reason, are bashful. They don't like to expose themselves in public, and that's too bad, because that's one role of leadership that you should take. So taking chances, not being afraid to fail, going out in the public, finding other people. I'll tell you another thing. I learn a lot from other people. When I go to conferences and speak, I always make sure there's time for people to ask questions, because my learning experience is from their questions. So those are some of the ways that I have adopted that approach.
That's fantastic, Bill. Those are great. And that's why continuous improvement is something, no matter what you call it, is always going to be around. And I love what you said about attracting like-minded people, and that's worth the effort of going the extra mile to come out of your comfort zone and write the book, go to the conference, do the presentation, all these things that are often, extra work and out of your comfort zone. But I like how you say that it attracts like-minded people, because that's really important. At the end of the day, we bring these like-minded high performers together and we can grow companies faster.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you very much for your time and your energy and all your insights, Bill. Really enjoyed the conversation, and hopefully our leaders listening to this are getting just as much out of it as I have. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. Have a good day.